You're listening to Scary Sleep Stories presents The Dark Hours.
Welcome, guys. I know a lot of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before you drift off like the video, subscribe if you're new, and comment what time it is right now. Let's see who's still awake and who's not alone tonight. Let's begin.
The GPS chimed cheerfully, announcing that I had arrived at my destination. I stared out the windshield, my hand still gripping the steering wheel, at a town that definitely wasn't Millbrook. The faded welcome sign read, Willow Creek, population 714. But something about those numbers seemed off, like they hadn't been updated in decades. I'd been driving for hours, heading to my cousin's wedding in Millbrook. It was supposed to be a straight shot down the highway, but somewhere along the way, my usually reliable GPS had led me astray. Now, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in ominous shades of red and purple, I found myself in a place that looked like it had been forgotten by time. Willow Creek's main street stretched before me, lined with buildings that seemed more suited to the 1950s than the present day. Neon signs flickered weakly in shop windows, and the few people visible on the sidewalks moved with an odd, shuffling gait that set my nerves on edge. I pulled over, fishing my phone out of my pocket to try and figure out where I'd gone wrong. No signal, of course. I sighed, resigning myself to the fact that I'd have to ask for directions the old-fashioned way. The diner across the street seemed as good a place as any to start. Its chrome exterior gleamed dully in the fading light, and a buzzing sign proclaimed it, Dot's Diner, best pie in the county. I stepped out of my car, the humid air immediately clinging to my skin. As I approached the diner, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The few people on the street had stopped to stare at me, their eyes unnaturally wide and unblinking. I quickened my pace, pushing open the diner door with more force than necessary. The bell above the door jangled discordantly, drawing the attention of everyone inside. And I do mean everyone. Every head turned in perfect unison to look at me, expressions blank and eyes glazed. For a moment, the only sound was the soft crackle of a radio playing what sounded like a big band tune from the 1940s. I cleared my throat. Hi, I'm a bit lost. Could someone point me in the direction of Millbrook? Silence. Then, slowly, conversation resumed as if I hadn't spoken. The patrons turned back to their meals, forks moving mechanically from plate to mouth. A waitress appeared at my elbow, making me jump. Her name tag read Dot, and her smile was just a little too wide to be natural. Well, honey, you're a long way from Millbrook, she said, her voice syrupy sweet. Why don't you sit down and have a slice of pie while we figure out how to get you back on track? Every instinct I had was screaming at me to leave, to get back in my car and drive as fast and as far as I could. But something in Dot's eyes held me in place. It wasn't kindness, exactly. More like hunger. Before I knew it, I was seated in a booth, a slice of cherry pie in front of me that I definitely hadn't ordered. Dot hovered nearby, that too wide smile still plastered on her face. Eat up, honey, she urged. It'll help you think clearer. I picked up the fork, if only to appease her. The pie filling glistened in a way that reminded me uncomfortably of fresh blood. I took a small bite, and immediately my senses were overwhelmed. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted, sweet and tart and rich in a way that seemed impossible. I found myself taking another bite, and another, unable to stop. As I ate, the diner around me seemed to shift and blur. The patrons' movements became more fluid, more natural. The music on the radio clarified, resolving into a tune I almost recognized. Even Dot's smile seemed less forced, more genuine. There, isn't that better? She asked, sliding into the seat across from me. Now tell me, what brings you to our little town? I blinked, trying to remember. Why was I here? Something about a wedding. But that seemed so unimportant now. I'm not sure, I admitted. Dot patted my hand, her touch sending an electric jolt up my arm. That's all right, honey. Lots of folks find their way here when they're a bit lost. Willow Creek has a way of calling to those who need it. I nodded, finding comfort in her words. The pie was gone, but I didn't remember finishing it. Outside, night had fallen completely, the street now illuminated by the warm glow of old-fashioned street lamps. "Why don't I show you to the hotel?" Dot suggested. "You look like you could use some rest." I followed her out of the diner, my legs moving of their own accord. The street was busier now, filled with people strolling and chatting. They all smiled and nodded at me as if I was an old friend they'd been expecting. The hotel was a grand old building, its Victorian architecture a stark contrast to the more modest structure surrounding it. As we climbed the steps, I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. Dot steadied me with a hand on my elbow, her touch both comforting and unsettling. "Don't worry," she said, her voice sounding distant and echoing. "Everyone feels a bit off at first. You'll adjust soon enough." The lobby was a blur of dark wood and red velvet. I have a vague memory of signing something, of being handed a heavy brass key. Then I was in a room, ornate wallpaper swirling in patterns that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. I collapsed onto the bed, my head spinning. As consciousness slipped away, I heard Dot's voice one last time, though I couldn't see her in the room. "Welcome to Willow Creek, honey. You're home now." I woke with a start, sunlight streaming through lace curtains I didn't remember. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or how I'd gotten there. Then it all came flooding back. The wrong turn, the strange town, Dot's diner, the pie. I sat up, my head pounding. The room around me was like something out of a period drama, all antique furniture and faded elegance. But there was something off about it, like a movie set that wasn't quite convincing up close. I stumbled to the window, pulling back the curtains. The street below was bustling with activity, but it was all wrong. Cars from the 1950s cruised by, fins gleaming in the morning sun. Women in poodle skirts and men in fedoras strolled down the sidewalk. It was like the whole town was stuck in a time warp. My phone. I needed to call for help. But when I reached for it, my pockets were empty. In fact, I realized with growing horror, I was wearing entirely different clothes. A button-up shirt and high-waisted trousers that looked like they came straight out of a vintage store. There was a knock at the door. "Room service," Dot's cheery voice called out. I opened the door cautiously. Dot stood there, balancing a tray with a steaming cup of coffee and another slice of that damn pie. "Good morning, sunshine," she chirped. "Thought you might need a pick-me-up after your long journey." "What's going on here?" I demanded, my voice hoarse. "What is this place? What did you do to me?" Dot's smile never wavered. Now, there's no need for all that. Willow Creek is just a special place for special people, people who need a fresh start, who want to forget their troubles. And you, my dear, looked like you needed that more than most. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog that still clung to my thoughts. But I didn't want this. I was just passing through. I need to get back. I have a wedding to... "A wedding?" Dot interrupted, her eyes gleaming. "Oh, honey, is that what's got you so worked up? Well, why didn't you say so? We love weddings here in Willow Creek. In fact, I think old Mr. Johnson's daughter is getting married this weekend. I'm sure they'd be happy to have you join the celebration." The way she said it made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized the true nature of my situation. This wasn't just a strange town. It was a trap, and I had walked right into it. I think I'd like to leave now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Dot's smile turned sad. "Oh, honey, don't you know? Nobody ever really leaves Willow Creek, but don't worry. You'll come to love it here. We all do, in the end." As if on cue, a group of townspeople appeared in the hallway behind her. Their smiles were identical to Dot's, their eyes holding the same hungry look I'd noticed the night before. "Why don't you come downstairs and meet everyone properly?" Dot suggested, reaching out to take my hand. After all, We're your family now. I wanted to resist, to run, to scream. But as Dot's fingers closed around mine, I felt that same electric jolt from the night before. And suddenly, the idea didn't seem so bad. After all, wasn't this what I'd always wanted? A place to belong, a simpler life, free from the stresses of the modern world. As Dot led me down the stairs, the other townspeople falling in behind us like a macabre parade, I felt the last of my resistance fading away. Willow Creek may not have been my intended destination, but maybe, just maybe, it was where I was meant to be all along. The sun shone brightly outside, the street alive with the bustle of a perfect 1950s day, and as I stepped out into it, hand in hand with my new family, I couldn't quite remember why I had ever wanted to leave. The first gunshot shattered the stillness of the forest, sending birds scattering into the sky. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. This was supposed to be a peaceful hike, a chance to clear my head and enjoy nature. But in an instant, it had turned into something far more dangerous. I'd set out early that morning, driving to a remote trailhead I discovered online. It promised stunning views and challenging terrain, perfect for a day-long solo hike. The first few hours had been everything I'd hoped for. Crisp autumn air, the crunch of leaves underfoot, and a sense of solitude that was hard to find in the city. But now, as I stood rooted to the spot, straining my ears for any further sounds, I realized how isolated I truly was. Miles from civilization, no cell phone signal, and apparently sharing the woods with someone armed and potentially dangerous. For a moment, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just a hunter, I thought. But it wasn't hunting season, and something in my gut told me this was different. The shot had sounded too close, too deliberate. Another crack echoed through the trees, closer this time. It was followed by shouting, the words indistinct but the tone unmistakably angry. My instincts kicked in, and I dove behind a large oak tree, trying to make myself as small as possible. From my hiding spot, I peered around the forest. The dense undergrowth that had seemed so beautiful earlier now felt oppressive, potentially hiding threats from every angle. I tried to control my breathing, knowing that any sound could give away my position. That's when I saw them. Two men, dressed in camouflage, crashed through the brush about 50 yards away. They were carrying rifles and moving with purpose, their eyes scanning the forest floor. Poachers, I realized with a jolt. And from their agitated movements, it was clear they were pursuing something, or someone. I pressed myself harder against the tree, willing myself to become invisible. The men were getting closer, their voices now clear enough for me to make out words. He couldn't have gotten far, one of them growled. Not with that wound. We can't let him get away, the other replied, his voice tight with tension. If he talks, we're done for. My mind raced. They weren't hunting animals, they were hunting a person. Someone who had seen something they shouldn't have. Someone who was now injured and running for their life. And I was caught in the middle of it. I knew I should stay hidden, wait for them to pass, and then make my way back to my car as quickly and quietly as possible. But a nagging voice in the back of my mind wouldn't let me. Someone out there needed help, and I might be their only chance. Taking a deep breath, I made a decision that would change everything. As soon as the poachers passed my hiding spot, I began to move in the opposite direction, searching for any sign of their wounded quarry. The forest was eerily quiet now, as if holding its breath. I moved as silently as I could, my eyes darting from tree to tree, looking for anything out of place. A broken branch, a scuff mark in the dirt, anything that might indicate someone had passed through in a hurry. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I spotted it. A smear of red on a tree trunk, about chest height. Blood. My stomach churned, but I pressed on, following the sporadic trail deeper into the woods. The sound of running water grew louder, and I soon found myself at the edge of a small stream. That's where I saw him. A man, probably in his 40s, slumped against a boulder. His shirt was soaked with blood, his face pale and drawn with pain. His eyes widened in fear as he saw me approach, his hand reaching for something at his side. I raised my hands, showing I was unarmed. "I'm here to help," I whispered urgently. "Those men, they're after you, right?" He nodded weakly, his hand relaxing. "Game warden," he managed to say between labored breaths. "Caught them. Illegal hunting operation. Big operation. Dangerous people." I knelt beside him, assessing his wound. The bullet had caught him in the shoulder, and while it was bleeding heavily, it didn't look immediately life-threatening, but he'd lost a lot of blood, and in this wilderness, even a minor injury could be fatal. "We need to move," I said, already shrugging off my backpack. "Can you walk?" He nodded again, gritting his teeth as I helped him to his feet. I quickly wrapped his wound as best I could with supplies from my first aid kit, then let him lean on me as we started to move. Our progress was agonizingly slow. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves sounded like a gunshot in the quiet forest. I had no real plan beyond putting distance between us and the poachers, hoping to find higher ground where we might get a cell signal. We had been moving for maybe 20 minutes when we heard it. Voices, carried on the wind. The poachers had picked up our trail. "There," the warden whispered, pointing to a steep hill. "Cave system. We can lose them in there." It was risky. If we got lost in the caves, we'd be in even more trouble. But with the poachers closing in, we didn't have much choice. We started the climb, each step a struggle for the injured man. Just as we reached the cave entrance, a shout rang out behind us. They had spotted us. Without hesitation, we plunged into the darkness of the cave. The next few hours were a blur of dark passages, stumbling steps, and heart-stopping moments of silence as we listened for our pursuers. The warden, whose name I learned was Mike, guided us as best he could, but it was clear he was weakening. Finally, we emerged from a narrow tunnel into a larger cavern. Faint light filtered in from somewhere above, revealing a space about the size of a small room. Mike collapsed against the wall, his breathing ragged. "We can't go any further," I said, knowing it was true even as I hated to admit it. "We'll have to make a stand here." Mike nodded grimly. "There's a backup gun in my boot," he said. "You know how to shoot?" I shook my head. The only shooting I'd ever done was at a carnival booth once. Mike sighed, then walked me through the basics. The weight of the pistol felt strange and terrifying in my hand. We didn't have to wait long. The sound of footsteps echoed through the tunnel, growing louder. I positioned myself behind a large rock, my heart pounding so hard I was sure it would give away our location. The first poacher entered the cavern cautiously, his rifle sweeping the space. I held my breath, finger on the trigger, praying I wouldn't have to use it. Suddenly, a shower of loose rocks clattered down from above, startling the man. In that moment of distraction, Mike lunged from his hiding spot, tackling the poacher to the ground. The gun went off, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. For a terrifying moment, I didn't know who had been hit. Then the second poacher burst into the cavern, his rifle aimed at Mike. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the poacher's finger tightening on the trigger. Without thinking, I stepped out from behind the rock and fired. The gun kicked in my hand, the shot going wide, but it was enough. The poacher turned towards me, giving Mike the opening he needed to knock him down. In the chaos that followed, I somehow managed to find some rope in my backpack. We tied up the poachers, who had both been subdued more by surprise than by our fighting skills. As the adrenaline wore off, the reality of what had just happened hit me. I sank to the ground, my whole body shaking. Mike sat heavily beside me, his face pale but his eyes clear. "You did good, kid," he said softly. Not many people would have stopped to help a stranger in the woods. I managed a weak smile. Guess I watched too many superhero movies as a kid. A faint sound caught our attention, the whir of helicopter blades. Mike's face broke into a relieved grin. "Back up," he said. "I missed my check-in. They must have come looking." As the sound grew louder, sunlight suddenly flooded the cavern. A hole in the ceiling, previously unnoticed, was large enough for us to be spotted from the air. Within minutes, rescue crews were rappelling down, and our ordeal was finally over. In the days that followed, as I gave statements to police and park rangers, the full scope of what we had stumbled into became clear. The poachers were part of a large, illegal hunting operation that had been targeting endangered species in the area for years. Our actions had led to the bust of a major wildlife crime ring. Mike recovered from his injuries and made sure I was recognized for my role in the incident. But the greatest reward was the knowledge that I had made a difference, that when faced with a critical moment, I had chosen to help rather than turn away. Now, whenever I go hiking, I carry a more comprehensive first aid kit, a satellite phone, and a newfound appreciation for the unexpected turns life can take. The forest is still my sanctuary, but I move through it with opened eyes, always aware that adventure, and the opportunity to make a difference, might be waiting just around the next bend in the trail. The last call for drinks echoed through the empty bar, my voice sounding hollow in the cavernous space. I'd been working at the Rusty Nail for 3 years, but I'd never seen it this dead on a Friday night. As I wiped down the counter for the 100th time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was the storm brewing outside, or maybe it was just my imagination working overtime in the eerie quiet. Either way, I was counting the minutes until I could lock up and head home. I'm Sarah, by the way, bartender extraordinaire tonight, apparently the only soul brave enough to face the howling wind and sheeting rain. Even my boss had called it quits early, leaving me with strict instructions to close up shop at midnight sharp. No exceptions. The ancient clock above the bar ticked closer to the hour, each movement of its hands feeling like an eternity. I'd already cleaned every glass, restocked every bottle, and swept the floor twice. There was nothing left to do but wait. A flash of lightning illuminated the world outside, followed almost immediately by a crack of thunder that shook the windows. I jumped, nearly dropping the glass I was polishing. "Get a grip, Sarah," I chided myself. "It's just a storm." That's when I heard it. A soft scraping sound, barely audible over the rain pounding against the roof. I froze, straining my ears. There it was again, coming from the back of the bar, near the storage room. "Hello?" I called out, hating how my voice quavered. "We're closed." Silence. Then, unmistakably, the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving towards me. My heart raced as I scanned the bar for anything I could use as a weapon. I settled on a heavy bottle of bourbon, gripping it tightly as I edged towards the end of the bar. "I'm armed," I lied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "And I've already called the police." The footsteps stopped. For a moment, all I could hear was the storm and the pounding of my own heart. Then, a voice, low and raspy. "No, you haven't." A figure emerged from the shadows at the far end of the bar. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, his face hidden beneath the hood of a dark jacket. He moved with an unsettling grace, each step precise and measured. "We're closed," I repeated, my knuckles white around the neck of the bourbon bottle. "You need to leave." He chuckled, the sound sending a chill down my spine. "Oh, I don't think so. In fact, I think you're going to pour me a drink." As he stepped into the dim light cast by the bar's old neon signs, I caught a glimpse of his face. His eyes were dark, intense, fixed on me with an unsettling focus. But it was his smile that really got to me. Too wide, too many teeth like a predator eyeing its prey. "Listen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't want any trouble. Take whatever's in the till and go. I won't call the cops, I swear." He laughed again, sliding onto a bar stool with fluid ease. I'm not here for money, Sarah. I'm here for something far more valuable. The fact that he knew my name sent a fresh wave of fear through me. I glanced at the door, gauging my chances of making a run for it. As if reading my thoughts, the man's smile widened. "I wouldn't if I were you," he said softly. "Now, how about that drink?" My bartender instincts kicked in, overriding my fear for a moment. "What's your poison?" "Surprise me," he replied, his eyes never leaving my face. With shaking hands, I set down the bourbon and reached for a glass. My mind raced, trying to figure a way out of this situation. The phone was in my pocket, but there was no way I could call for help without him noticing. Maybe if I could distract him somehow. I settled on a classic old-fashioned, my hands moving almost on autopilot as I mixed the drink. The familiar routine helped calm my nerves, if only slightly. As I worked, I tried to engage him in conversation, hoping to learn something, anything that might help me. "So," I said, keeping my tone as casual as possible, "come here often?" He smirked, clearly amused by my attempt at small talk. "First time, actually. But I've been watching this place for a while. Watching you." A chill ran down my spine. "Me? Why?" "You're special, Sarah," he said, leaning forward. "You have something I need." I slid the finished drink across the bar, careful to keep my distance. "Look, I'm just a bartender. I don't have anything valuable." "Oh, but you do," he insisted. "You just don't know it yet." As he reached for the glass, his sleeve rode up slightly, revealing a strange symbol tattooed on his wrist. It looked like a series of interconnected circles, with what appeared to be an eye in the center. Something about it felt wrong, unnatural. He caught me staring and smiled that too-wide smile again. "Curious, aren't you? Good. Curiosity is the first step." "First step to what?" I asked, unable to stop myself. He took a sip of his drink, nodding appreciatively. "To awakening. To seeing the world as it truly is." Great, I thought. Not just a creepy stalker, but a creepy stalker with delusions of grandeur. I needed to end this. Fast. "Listen," I said, trying to sound firm. "I don't know what you think I have, but you're mistaken. Now, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We closed 10 minutes ago." His expression darkened, all pretense of friendliness vanishing. "I'm not going anywhere, Sarah, and neither are you. Not until you give me what I came for." "And what exactly is that?" I demanded, fear giving way to anger. In response, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, ornate box. It was made of some dark wood I didn't recognize, carved with symbols similar to the one on his wrist. As he set it on the bar, I could have sworn I heard a faint whisper coming from inside. "In this box," he said, his voice low and intense, "is a key that can only be used by someone with a very special gift. A gift that you possess, whether you know it or not." I stared at the box, a sense of dread washing over me. Part of me wanted to grab it and run, while another part wanted to smash it to pieces. Instead, I forced myself to meet his gaze. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. "I don't have any gift. I'm just a normal person trying to do my job." He shook his head, a look of pity crossing his face. "Oh, Sarah, there's nothing normal about you. Why do you think you've always felt different? Why do you think you can sometimes sense things before they happen? Why do you think the spirits in this old bar whisper to you when no one else is around?" I took a step back, my mind reeling. How could he know about the whispers? I'd never told anyone about those, convinced I was just imagining things. But here was this stranger, laying bare secrets I'd kept hidden even from myself. What are you?" I whispered. His smile returned, but this time it held a hint of sadness. "I am a keeper, one of those charged with maintaining the balance between this world and the ones beyond. And you, Sarah, are a gatekeeper, one with the power to open doors that should remain closed, or to seal them shut forever. As he spoke, the air in the bar seemed to thicken. The shadows in the corners grew deeper, more menacing, and the whispers I'd always dismissed as my imagination grew louder, more insistent. "This isn't real," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were a lie. Deep down, in a part of myself I'd always tried to ignore, I knew he was telling the truth. "It's very real," he said softly, "and it's time for you to accept your role. Open the box, Sarah. Claim the key. Embrace your destiny." I looked at the box, then back at him. In that moment, I realized I was standing on a precipice. One choice would lead me back to my normal life, tending bar and pretending I didn't hear whispers in the night. The other would plunge me into a world I didn't understand, full of dangers I couldn't imagine. But as the whispers grew to a crescendo, as the shadows seemed to press in around us, I knew there was really only one choice. With a trembling hand, I reached for the box. As my fingers touched the carved wood, a jolt of energy shot through me. The box sprang open, revealing a key that seemed to be made of pure light. As I lifted it, the world around me shifted, reality peeling away to reveal glimpses of other places, other times. The stranger, the keeper, nodded approvingly. "And so it begins," he said, his voice seeming to come from very far away. I clutched the key to my chest, feeling its power coursing through me. Whatever came next, whatever challenges this new reality held, I knew my life would never be the same. The rusty nail faded away, and with it, my old life as just another bartender in just another small-town bar. A new journey was beginning, and somehow, I knew it was one I'd been preparing for my entire life. The crunch of twigs under heavy boots jolted us from our peaceful morning. Emma and I froze, our coffee mugs suspended midway to our lips, as we locked eyes across the cabin's small porch. We'd come here to escape the world, but it seemed the world had found us anyway, and it was armed. It was supposed to be the perfect getaway, a quaint cabin nestled in the woods, miles from the nearest town, with no cell service, and only the sounds of nature to keep us company. Emma had found it online, a last-minute booking for a long weekend. "Just what we need," she'd said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. No distractions, no interruptions, just us. I'd agreed, eager to leave behind the stress of work and the constant buzz of city life. And for the first day and a half, it had been perfect. We'd hiked, swam in the crystal-clear lake, and spent long hours simply sitting on the porch, talking and laughing like we hadn't done in years. But now, as the sound of voices drifted through the trees, that bubble of tranquility shattered. "Did you hear that?" Emma whispered, setting her mug down with a trembling hand. I nodded, my mind racing. It could be other hikers, I told myself. Or maybe the property owner coming to check on something. But the tension in the air, the way the forest had suddenly gone quiet, told me this was something else entirely. "Get inside," I said, keeping my voice low. "Lock the door. I'll see what's going on." Emma opened her mouth to protest, but another sound cut her off, the unmistakable metallic click of a gun being cocked. We moved quickly, slipping inside the cabin and shutting the door as quietly as possible. Through the window, I could see movement at the edge of the clearing. 2 men, dressed in camouflage, their faces obscured by thick beards and low-brimmed hats. "What do we do?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, at a loss. We were trapped. The cabin had no basement, no secret passages, just 4 walls and a roof, suddenly feeling very flimsy against the threat outside. The men were closer now, their voices clear enough for us to make out words. "I'm telling you, I saw something," one of them said, his tone urgent. "Could have sworn it was a person." "Better not be," the other replied, his voice gruff. "We can't have any witnesses." My blood ran cold. Witnesses to what? What had we stumbled into? Emma tugged at my sleeve, pointing to the back of the cabin. There was a small window there, barely big enough for a person to squeeze through. It was our only chance. We moved silently, gathering what we could. Our phones, though useless without signal, a flashlight, a bottle of water. As Emma worked on opening the window, I scanned the cabin for anything we could use as a weapon. My eyes landed on a heavy cast iron skillet hanging by the stove. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The window creaked as Emma pushed it open, the sound impossibly loud in the tense silence. We both froze, listening. The voices outside had stopped. "Go," I whispered, giving Emma a boost. She slithered through the opening, landing with a soft thud on the other side. I passed her our makeshift supplies, then began to squeeze through myself. I was halfway out when I heard the cabin door slam open. "Hey!" a voice shouted. "We've got runners!" Adrenaline surged through me. I tumbled out of the window, scraping my back on the rough wood. Emma was there, pulling me to my feet, and then we were running. We plunged into the forest, branches whipping at our faces, roots threatening to trip us with every step. Behind us, I could hear the men crashing through the underbrush, their shouts growing fainter as we put distance between us. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs felt like lead. Finally, gasping for breath, we ducked behind a large fallen tree. I think we lost them," Emma panted, her face flushed and streaked with dirt. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. My mind was whirling, trying to make sense of what was happening. Who were those men? What were they doing out here? And most importantly, how were we going to get out of this alive? As our breathing slowed, the sounds of the forest began to return. Birds chirping, leaves rustling in the breeze. It was almost possible to believe that the last half hour had been some sort of surreal dream, but the ache in my muscles and the fear still churning in my gut told me it was all too real. "We need to keep moving," I said finally, my voice hoarse. "Find a road, or a town, somewhere we can get help." Emma nodded, her eyes wide and frightened. "But which way? I don't even know where we are." I pulled out my phone, more out of habit than hope. Still no signal, but the compass app was working, at least. "The road we came in on was to the east," I said. "If we head that way, we should hit it eventually." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all we had. We set off, moving as quickly and quietly as we could through the dense forest. Every snapping twig, every rustle in the undergrowth made us freeze, our hearts pounding. But each time it turned out to be nothing more than a squirrel or a bird. We had been walking for what felt like hours when we heard it, the distant rumble of an engine. Hope surged through me. A car meant a road, and a road meant potential rescue. But as we crept closer to the sound, that hope turned to ash in my mouth. Through the trees, I could see a clearing, and in that clearing was a sight that made my blood run cold. A group of men, at least a dozen, were gathered around several large trucks. They were unloading crates, their contents hidden but easy enough to guess given the circumstances. This was no small-time operation. This was organized, professional, and extremely dangerous. I felt Emma tense beside me. "We need to go," she whispered. "Now." But before we could move, a shout rang out. "Over there! I saw something." We ran. There was no attempt at stealth now, no careful movement through the forest. We crashed through the underbrush, branches tearing at our clothes, roots threatening to send us sprawling with every step. Behind us, I could hear the sounds of pursuit. Men shouting, branches breaking, the occasional crack of a gunshot that sent splinters of wood flying from nearby trees. My lungs were on fire, my legs screaming in protest, but terror kept me moving. The thought of what would happen if we were caught driving me forward. We burst out of the tree line onto a dirt road. To our left, it disappeared around a bend. To our right, about 100 yards away, was a bridge spanning a deep ravine. "The bridge," Emma gasped. We can hide underneath." It was risky, If they thought of looking there, we'd be trapped. But the alternative was to keep running, and I didn't know how much longer we could manage that. We sprinted for the bridge, the sound of our pursuers growing louder with each passing second. As we reached it, I helped Emma down the steep embankment, then followed, sliding and scrambling to the space beneath the bridge's deck. We pressed ourselves against the concrete support, trying to quiet our ragged breathing. Above us, we could hear the thud of boots on the bridge, voices calling out to each other. They can't have gotten far. Spread out. Check the woods on the other side. What if they went down to the river? My heart nearly stopped at that last one. But then another voice, authoritative and impatient, cut through the chatter. We don't have time for this. The buyer will be here any minute. If they ran, they ran. We'll deal with it later. Everyone back to base, now. There were grumbles of protest, but soon the voices faded, replaced by the sound of engines starting up and driving away. We stayed hidden for what felt like hours, neither of us daring to speak. Finally, when the forest had been quiet for a long time, I risked a whisper. I think they're gone. Emma nodded, her face pale and streaked with tears. I hadn't noticed her crying. What do we do now? I took a deep breath, trying to think clearly despite the fear and exhaustion clouding my mind. We follow the road, I said finally, but we stay in the woods, out of sight. Sooner or later, it has to lead to a town or a highway. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all we had. As we climbed back up to the road, the reality of our situation hit me anew. We were lost in the wilderness, being hunted by dangerous criminals, with no way to call for help. Our survival would depend on our wits, our stamina, and no small amount of luck. But as I looked at Emma, saw the determination in her eyes despite her fear, I felt a glimmer of hope. We were in this together, and together, somehow, we would find a way out. We set off down the road, staying just inside the tree line. Every step took us further from the nightmare we'd stumbled into, and closer, I hoped, to safety. But I knew the real journey was just beginning. Even if we made it out of these woods, we'd have a story to tell. A dangerous story that some very dangerous people would want to keep quiet. Our relaxing weekend getaway had turned into a fight for survival, and it was a fight I was determined to win. The phone rang at exactly 3:17 a.m., its shrill tone cutting through the silence of my bedroom like a knife. I jolted awake, my heart racing as I fumbled for the device on my nightstand. The screen showed an unknown number, and for a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But something, instinct perhaps, or just morbid curiosity, made me answer. Hello? I mumbled, my voice thick with sleep. I see you, Amanda, a low, gravelly voice responded. You really should invest in better curtains. I bolted upright, fully awake now, my eyes darting to the window. The curtains were drawn, but suddenly they felt as transparent as gauze. I could almost feel unseen eyes boring into me from the darkness outside. Who is this? I demanded, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. The voice chuckled, a sound that sent chills down my spine. Just a friend, Amanda. A friend who's been watching you for a very long time. I ended the call, my hands shaking as I set the phone down. It had to be a prank, right? Some sick joke played by a bored teenager or a disgruntled ex. But as I sat there in the dark, the silence now oppressive rather than peaceful, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was something more sinister. Sleep eluded me for the rest of the night. I tossed and turned, jumping at every creak of the house settling, every rustle of leaves outside my window. When my alarm finally went off at 7 a.m., I was exhausted but relieved to see the soft light of dawn filtering through the curtains. The events of the night felt distant in the morning light, like a half-remembered nightmare. I went through my usual routine, shower, coffee, breakfast, trying to convince myself that it was nothing to worry about. By the time I left for work, I had almost succeeded in pushing the unsettling call out of my mind. Almost. The day passed in a blur of meetings and deadlines, the mundane rhythm of office life a welcome distraction. It wasn't until I was packing up to leave that the memory of the call came rushing back. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Red is a good color on you, Amanda, but I prefer the blue blouse you wore last Tuesday." My blood ran cold. I looked down at the red sweater I was wearing, then glanced around the office wildly. Most of my co-workers had already left for the day. Those still at their desks were engrossed in their work, paying me no attention. But someone, somewhere, was watching me. I practically ran to my car, my keys clutched tightly in my hand like a weapon. The drive home was a nerve-wracking affair. Every red light an eternity where I scanned the surrounding cars, looking for anyone who might be following me. Once home, I double-checked all the locks, drew the curtains tight, and collapsed onto my couch. My mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening. Who could be doing this? An ex-boyfriend? A disgruntled co-worker? But none of the possibilities quite fit. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. "You should really eat something, Amanda. You barely touched your lunch today." I threw the phone across the room, where it landed with a dull thud on the carpet. How did they know? How could they possibly know what I had or hadn't eaten? The next few days passed in a haze of paranoia. The calls and texts kept coming, always from different numbers, always revealing some intimate detail of my day. They knew when I woke up, what I wore, who I talked to. They even knew about the guilty pleasure romance novel I'd been reading in private. I changed my phone number, but it didn't help. I went to the police, but without any explicit threats. They said there was little they could do. I was trapped in a waking nightmare, constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every unexpected sound. A week after the first call, I was a wreck. I'd barely slept, barely eaten. I'd called in sick to work, unable to face the thought of being out in public where unseen eyes might be watching. I sat in my living room, curtains drawn, lights off, staring at my silent phone and waiting for the next message. When it came, it was different from the others. "I think it's time we met face to face, Amanda. Come to Riverside Park at midnight. Come alone or there will be consequences." My first instinct was to ignore it, to call the police, to run. But a part of me, the part that was tired of being afraid, tired of not knowing, made me consider it. If I went, maybe I could finally confront my tormentor. Maybe I could end this. Against my better judgment, I found myself walking through the deserted park just before midnight. The moon was full, casting long shadows across the path. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig made me flinch. As I approached the center of the park, I saw a figure standing near the fountain. They were backlit by a street lamp, their features obscured. My heart pounded in my chest as I drew closer. "Hello, Amanda," the figure said, and I recognized the gravelly voice from that first phone call. "I'm so glad you decided to join me." As they stepped into the light, I gasped. It wasn't at all who I expected, not some creepy stalker or vengeful ex. It was Sarah, the quiet IT girl from my office. Sarah, who I'd barely spoken to beyond a few polite greetings. "Why?" I managed to choke out. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah's face twisted into a smile that sent chills down my spine. "Why? Because I could. Because it was so easy. You people, you go about your lives, never realizing how exposed you are, how much of yourselves you broadcast to the world." She pulled out a tablet, tapping at the screen. "Your phone, your computer, your smart home devices, they're all windows into your life, Amanda. Windows that someone with the right skills can easily look through." I felt sick. All this time, she'd been spying on me through my own devices. "But why me?" I asked. "What did I do to you?" Sarah laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. You didn't do anything. You were just convenient. The right combination of trusting and technologically naive. A perfect subject for my little experiment." "Experiment," I repeated. my voice barely a whisper. To see how far I could go, Sarah said, her eyes gleaming with a manic light. To see how much I could learn, how deeply I could burrow into someone's life without them knowing. And oh, Amanda, you did not disappoint. The things I've seen, the secrets I've learned. She trailed off, shaking her head with a twisted sort of fondness. But all experiments must come to an end. And I'm afraid, Amanda, that it's time for you to be discontinued. As she spoke, she reached into her jacket. I saw the glint of metal and realized with horror that she was pulling out a gun. Time seemed to slow down. I saw Sarah's finger moving towards the trigger. I saw the barrel of the gun pointing at my chest. And in that moment, survival instinct took over. I lunged forward, catching Sarah off guard. We grappled for the gun, our struggle silent save for our heavy breathing. She was stronger than she looked, but desperation lent me strength. Suddenly, a deafening bang echoed through the park. For a moment, I wasn't sure who had been hit. Then, Sarah stumbled backward, a look of shock on her face. She looked down at the growing red stain on her shirt, then back at me, before collapsing to the ground. I stood there, the gun heavy in my hand, my ears ringing from the shot. I don't know how long I remained frozen like that before the sound of distant sirens snapped me back to reality. The aftermath was a blur of police statements and psychological evaluations. Sarah survived, barely, and was arrested. The full extent of her experiment came to light. Not just me, but dozens of victims, their lives laid bare through the technology they trusted. In the months that followed, I changed. I got rid of my smart devices, became paranoid about my digital footprint. The carefree, trusting person I had been was gone, replaced by someone always looking over her shoulder, always wondering who might be watching. But slowly, gradually, I began to heal, to trust again, albeit cautiously, to reclaim my life. Now, as I sit here writing this, I do so as a warning. In this interconnected world we've built, privacy is an illusion. Our lives are an open book to those who know how to read it. So be careful, be vigilant, and always remember, in the digital age, you never know who might be watching. The cardboard box was heavier than it looked, its contents shifting ominously as I lifted it from the dusty shelf. Professor Blackwood's office was a cluttered maze of books, artifacts, and filing cabinets. But this box stood out. It was unmarked, sealed with thick packing tape that had yellowed with age. As I set it on the desk, a chill ran down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to uncover something I wasn't supposed to see. I'm Liv, by the way. Grad student, part-time house sitter, and now, apparently, unwitting detective in a mystery I never asked to be part of. It had started innocently enough. Professor Blackwood, my thesis advisor, had asked me to house sit while he attended a conference in Europe. Just water the plants and collect the mail, he'd said, handing me the keys with a distracted smile. Oh, and if you could organize my office a bit, that would be splendid. What he hadn't mentioned was that his office was more like a small library that had mated with an antique shop and then exploded. I'd been at it for days, sorting through papers, cataloging books, and trying to impose some semblance of order on the chaos. That's when I found the box. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the tape. This wasn't what I'd signed up for. I should just put it back, pretend I never saw it. But curiosity, that dangerous and insistent voice, urged me on. Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed a letter opener from the desk and sliced through the tape. The musty smell of old paper hit me as I opened the flaps. Inside, I found a collection of notebooks, their covers worn and pages yellowed. Scattered among them were photographs, news clippings, and what looked like official documents, all decades old. I picked up the topmost notebook, its leather cover soft and supple under my fingers. Opening it, I found myself looking at Professor Blackwood's familiar handwriting, But the date at the top of the page made me pause. 1987. The professor would have been in his early 20s. As I began to read, the world around me faded away. The cramped office, the ticking clock, the faint sounds of traffic outside, all of it disappeared as I was drawn into a story that seemed too fantastical to be true. The notebook detailed Professor Blackwood's first expedition as a young anthropologist. He'd traveled to a remote village in the Amazon, chasing rumors of a lost tribe with extraordinary abilities. But what he found there defied explanation. He wrote of people who could communicate without speaking, who could heal wounds with a touch, who seemed to know things they couldn't possibly know. At first, he'd been skeptical, looking for rational explanations, but as the evidence mounted, he was forced to consider the impossible. I flipped through the pages, my heart racing. Photographs showed people with strange markings on their skin, glowing in the dim jungle light. There were detailed sketches of plants I'd never seen before, with notes on their supposed mystical properties, and there were accounts of rituals that seemed to defy the laws of physics. But as I read on, the tone of the writing changed. Excitement gave way to fear. The last few entries were hurried, the handwriting almost frantic. Professor Blackwood wrote of being followed, of strange accidents that seemed too coincidental. The final page ended mid-sentence, as if he'd been interrupted suddenly. I set the notebook down, my hands shaking. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of elaborate fiction, maybe research for a novel. But as I sifted through the other contents of the box, a darker picture emerged. There were official-looking documents, heavily redacted, but I could make out phrases like subjects acquired and anomalous abilities. News clippings reported on the mysterious disappearance of an entire village in the Amazon. And there were photographs, blurry, out of focus, but unmistakably showing figures that looked more like special effects than real people. As I pieced it all together, a chill settled over me. If this was true, if even a fraction of it was real, then Professor Blackwood had stumbled onto something extraordinary and dangerous. The kind of discovery that powerful people might want to keep hidden. But why had he kept all of this? And why leave it where someone like me could find it? The answer came to me with a jolt of realization. He wanted it to be found. This wasn't carelessness. It was insurance. If anything happened to him, the truth would come out. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Put it back. Forget what you saw. For your own safety. My blood ran cold. I looked around wildly, half expecting to see someone watching me through the window. But the street outside was empty, just the usual quiet of a college town on a weekday afternoon. I should have listened. Should have put everything back in the box, sealed it up, and pretended I'd never seen it. But I couldn't. The mystery was too compelling, the implications too enormous. If what Professor Blackwood had discovered was real, it could change everything we thought we knew about human potential. With shaking hands, I began to take photos of everything in the box. The notebooks, the documents, the photographs. I captured it all, uploading the images to a secure cloud storage as fast as I could. Whatever happened next, there would be a record. As I worked, my mind raced. Who had sent that text? How did they know what I'd found? And most importantly, what had happened to Professor Blackwood? Was his conference in Europe just a cover story? I was so engrossed in my task that I almost missed the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, purposeful steps that stopped right outside the office door. My heart leapt into my throat as I heard the jingle of keys. In a panic, I shoved everything back into the box, not caring about the order. I had just managed to close the flaps when the door swung open. Two men in dark suits stood there, their expressions grim. They weren't university security, that much was clear. One of them stepped forward, his hand reaching into his jacket. "Ms. Thompson," he said, his voice cold and professional, "we need you to come with us." I backed away, my mind whirling. How did they know my name? What did they want? But even as these questions flashed through my mind, I knew the answers. They were here for the box, for the secrets it contained. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm just here to water the plants." The man's expression didn't change. "Please don't make this difficult. We have some questions about your recent, discoveries." I glanced at the window, gauging my chances. We were only on the second floor. If I could just... The man must have sensed my intention. He moved with surprising speed, blocking my path to the window. "That would be unwise, Ms. Thompson. We're not here to hurt you. We just want to talk." But something in his eyes told me that talking was the last thing on their agenda. Whatever Professor Blackwood had uncovered, whatever secrets that box contained, these men were here to make sure it stayed buried. In that moment, I made a decision. I couldn't let this end here, couldn't let the truth be silenced. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, I grabbed the box and hurled it at the men. In their moment of surprise, I darted past them, out into the hallway. I ran like I'd never run before, down the stairs and out of the building. Behind me, I could hear shouts and the pounding of feet, but I didn't look back. I just ran, my feet carrying me away from the campus and into the busy streets of the town. As I ducked into an alley, trying to catch my breath, I realized my life had just changed irrevocably. I was now part of something bigger than I could have imagined, caught up in a mystery that spanned decades and continents. I didn't have the box anymore, but I had the photos, I had the knowledge, and I had a choice to make. I could try to forget everything I'd seen, go back to my normal life and pretend none of this had happened. Or I could dig deeper, follow the trail that Professor Blackwood had left behind, and uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As I heard sirens in the distance and saw a black car slowly cruising down the street, I knew what my decision would be. This was just the beginning. The real adventure and the real danger was yet to come. With one last look at the university building where my ordinary life had ended, I turned and disappeared into the maze of city streets. Whatever happened next, I was determined to see this through. For Professor Blackwood, for the truth, and for the incredible secret that could change the world. The rhythmic slap of my sneakers against the pavement was the only sound breaking the eerie silence of the park. Moonlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across my path. It was just another late-night run, or so I thought. But as I rounded the bend near the old fountain, a chill ran down my spine. Someone was following me. I'm Jack, by the way. 32 software engineer, and until tonight, just another guy trying to stay in shape with his nightly jogs. I'd been running this same route through Oakwood Park for years, even after the city cut the budget for park maintenance and the place started to look a bit rough around the edges. The solitude and the challenge of navigating the poorly lit paths had always been part of the appeal. But tonight was different. I'd felt off from the moment I entered the park, like there were eyes on me. I'd shrugged it off at first, chalking it up to too much caffeine and not enough sleep. Now, as I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me, I realized my instincts had been right all along. I picked up my pace, heart pounding in my chest. The footsteps quickened to match. I chanced a glance over my shoulder and caught a glimpse of a dark figure about 50 yards back. Whoever it was, they were gaining on me. My mind raced, cataloging everything I knew about the park's layout. The main entrance was still a good mile away, but there was a side gate closer. If I could just make it there, I'd be out on a well-lit street with plenty of late-night businesses still open. I veered off the main path, cutting across a grassy field towards the side gate. The damp grass made for treacherous footing, and I nearly lost my balance more than once. Behind me, I could hear my pursuer crashing through the underbrush, no longer bothering with stealth. The side gate came into view, a welcome sight in the darkness, but as I drew closer, my heart sank. The gate was chained shut, a new padlock gleaming in the moonlight. When had they done that? In my moment of hesitation, the footsteps behind me grew louder. I spun around, back pressed against the gate, ready to face whoever was chasing me. The figure emerged from the shadows, and I felt a jolt of recognition. It was a man I'd seen hanging around the park entrance when I'd started my run. Average height, nondescript clothes, but with the intensity in his eyes that had made me uneasy even then. "Whoa, easy there," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "I'm not going to hurt you, I just want to talk." "Talk?" I panted, still trying to catch my breath. "You chased me through a dark park to talk." He held up his hands in a placating gesture. "I know how this looks, but I had to make sure you were alone. It's not safe to be out here, you know? Not with what's been happening." I frowned, confusion momentarily overriding my fear. "What are you talking about? What's been happening?" The man glanced around nervously before leaning in closer. "The disappearances, 3 people in the last month, all last seen in or near this park. The police are keeping it quiet, but something's going on here. Something bad. I'd heard rumors, of course, whispers of people going missing, but nothing concrete, nothing in the news." "How do you know about this?" I asked, still wary, but curiosity getting the better of me. "Because I saw it happen," he replied, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The last one. A woman, jogging just like you. 1 minute she was there, the next, gone, like she'd been swallowed up by the shadows." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cool night air. That's not possible," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't so sure. The man nodded grimly. "I know how it sounds, but I've been watching this place, trying to figure out what's going on, and I think I'm close. That's why I had to warn you. You're not safe here." Part of me wanted to dismiss him as a crackpot, to push past him and run home as fast as I could. But there was an earnestness in his eyes, a desperation that gave me pause. And if I was honest with myself, hadn't I felt something off about the park lately? A heaviness in the air, a sense of being watched even when I was alone. "Okay," I said slowly. "Let's say I believe you. What do we do about it?" A look of relief washed over his face. "We need to find the source. I've narrowed it down to the old maintenance shed near the center of the park. Strange lights, weird noises. Something's happening there." I hesitated. Every instinct was screaming at me to get out of the park, to go home and forget this ever happened. But the thought of more people disappearing, of families left wondering what happened to their loved ones, I couldn't just walk away. "All right," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Show me." We set off deeper into the park, sticking to the shadows and moving as quietly as possible. The man introduced himself as Mike, a former park ranger who'd been let go when the budget cuts hit. He'd kept an eye on the place even after losing his job, unable to shake his attachment to the park he'd cared for so long. As we neared the center of the park, I began to notice things I'd overlooked before. Strange markings on trees, unlike any graffiti I'd seen, patches of ground where nothing seemed to grow, and an odd humming sound, just at the edge of hearing, that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The maintenance shed loomed before us, a dilapidated structure that looked like it hadn't been used in years, but as we drew closer, I could see a faint light seeping out from under the door. Mike put a finger to his lips, then gestured for me to follow him. We crept up to one of the grimy windows, peering inside. What I saw made my blood run cold. The interior of the shed was transformed. Gone were the rusty tools and cobwebs I'd expected. Instead, the space was filled with strange, pulsing machinery. In the center stood a swirling vortex of light, like a tear in the very fabric of reality. And there were things moving around it. Shapes that hurt my eyes to look at directly, shifting and changing in ways that defied explanation. As I watched, one of them reached into the vortex and pulled something out. With a jolt of horror, I realized it was a person, unconscious or worse. I couldn't tell. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of hallucination, a trick of the light. But the grim look on Mike's face told me he was seeing the same thing. "We need to stop this," he whispered urgently. "Whatever's happening here, whatever they're doing with those people, we can't let it continue." I nodded, though fear threatened to overwhelm me. "How? We're just two guys against whatever those things are." Mike reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. "EMP, he explained. "Ought to fry whatever's powering that portal, but we'll only have one shot at this." It was insane. We were two ordinary people up against something straight out of a sci-fi horror movie. But as I thought about the missing jogger, about all the other disappearances that might be connected to this, I knew we had to try. We formulated a hasty plan. Mike would create a distraction, drawing the attention of the creatures. I'd sneak in and plant the EMP as close to the central machinery as possible. Simple in theory, terrifying in practice. Everything happened in a blur. Mike threw open the door, shouting and waving his arms. The creatures turned, their alien forms rippling with what might have been surprise. I darted in, my hand shaking as I armed the EMP. Just as I was about to place it, one of the creatures spotted me. It let out a sound that defied description, a noise that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. I saw it lunge towards me, impossibly fast. I slammed the EMP down on the nearest piece of equipment and hit the trigger. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the world exploded into chaos. The machines sparked and sputtered, the air filling with the smell of ozone. The vortex began to collapse in on itself, pulling everything nearby towards it. The creatures screeched, their forms twisting and distorting as they were sucked into the closing portal. Mike grabbed my arm, yanking me towards the door. We ran, not daring to look back as the shed was engulfed in a blinding light. The ground shook beneath our feet, and I was sure the whole park was going to be swallowed up. And then, suddenly, it was over. We found ourselves sprawled on the grass, gasping for breath. Behind us, the maintenance shed was a smoking ruin, but blessedly, terrifyingly normal. In the days that followed, we tried to make sense of what had happened. The police investigated the shed, but found nothing beyond evidence of a fire. The missing people began to reappear, confused and disoriented, but otherwise unharmed. They remembered nothing of where they'd been. Mike and I met occasionally, trying to piece together the full story. But the truth is, we may never know exactly what was happening in Oakwood Park. All I know is that my nightly runs have taken on a new significance. Each time I lace up my sneakers, I'm not just exercising, I'm patrolling, keeping an eye out for anything unusual. Because now I know the truth. The world is stranger and more dangerous than we can imagine. And sometimes, the only thing standing between our reality and chaos is a guy out for a jog and an ex-park ranger with a homemade EMP. So if you're ever out for a late-night run and you get that feeling of being watched, trust your instincts. You never know what might be lurking in the shadows. The sharp pop of the tire exploding shattered the quiet night, sending our car skidding across the empty highway. I wrestled with the steering wheel, my knuckles white with effort, as we finally came to a stop on the gravel shoulder. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by our ragged breathing and the faint tick-tick-tick of the cooling engine. "Everyone okay?" I asked, glancing at my wife, Sarah, in the passenger seat, and our daughter, Emily, in the back. They nodded, shaken but unharmed. I stepped out of the car, the cool night air a stark contrast to the stuffy interior. We were in the middle of nowhere, miles from the last town we'd passed through and who knows how far from the next. The moon hung low and heavy in the sky, casting long shadows across the deserted landscape. As I inspected the shredded remains of our tire, a sense of unease began to creep over me. It was too quiet out here. No crickets chirping, no distant sounds of traffic. Just an oppressive silence that seemed to press in from all sides. I pulled out my phone, already knowing what I'd see. No signal. Of course. Looks like we're going to be here for a while. I told Sarah as I climbed back into the car. I'll change the tire, but we should probably wait until morning to try and find help. She nodded, her face pale in the dim light. I don't like it out here, John. It feels wrong. I knew what she meant. There was something off about this stretch of highway, something that set my nerves on edge. But I pushed the feeling aside, focusing on the practical aspects of our situation. It'll be fine, I assured her, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We've got water, some snacks. We'll just hunker down for the night and head out at first light. I set about changing the tire, the familiar task helping to calm my nerves. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the immediate area around the car. But beyond that small circle of light, the night seemed to press in, thick and impenetrable. That's when I saw it. A pair of headlights in the distance, approaching slowly. Relief washed over me. Another car meant help, or at least the possibility of it. But as the vehicle drew closer, that relief turned to unease. It was moving too slowly, almost cautiously. And there was something off about the headlights. They seemed too far apart, too high off the ground for a normal car. The vehicle came to a stop about 50 yards behind us. In the rearview mirror, I could just make out the outline of a large truck or van. The headlights stayed on, blinding in their intensity. John. Sarah's voice was tight with fear. What's going on? I shook my head, trying to appear calm for her and Emily's sake. Probably just someone stopping to help. I'll go check it out. But as I stepped out of the car, a chill ran down my spine. The truck's engine had cut off, but no one had gotten out. It just sat there, headlights blazing, like some predatory animal watching its prey. I took a few tentative steps towards it, my hand raised in a friendly wave. Hello? We could use some help if you've got a moment. No response, no movement, just the steady glare of those headlights. I was about to turn back to our car when I heard it, the sound of a door opening and closing, followed by footsteps on gravel. But I couldn't see anyone. The space between the headlights remained empty. Who's there? I called out, my voice sounding thin and weak in the vast emptiness around us. The footsteps continued, slow and deliberate, moving towards me. But there was still no one visible. Panic seized me. I ran back to our car, practically diving into the driver's seat. We need to go, now. Sarah's eyes were wide with fear. But the tire? No time. I cut her off, jamming the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered once, twice, before roaring to life. I threw the car into drive, the partially attached spare tire wobbling dangerously as we pulled away. In the rearview mirror, I saw the truck's headlights swing around, following us. It started to move, picking up speed quickly. Dad, what's happening? Emily's small voice came from the back seat, trembling with fear. It's okay, sweetheart, I lied, pushing our damaged car to its limits. We're just playing a little game of chase, and that's all. The truck was gaining on us, its massive form filling my rearview mirror. The spare tire was making the car pull to one side, requiring all my concentration to keep us on the road. Suddenly, a new set of headlights appeared ahead of us. Another truck, identical to the one behind us, blocking the road. I swore under my breath, looking frantically for an escape route. There, a narrow dirt road branching off from the highway. I wrenched the steering wheel, sending us bumping and jolting down the unpaved track. The trucks followed, their powerful engines easily handling the rough terrain. We were being herded, I realized with growing horror, driven deeper into this desolate wasteland, away from any possibility of help. The dirt road ended abruptly at the edge of a cliff. I slammed on the brakes, our car skidding to a stop mere feet from the drop. The trucks pulled up behind us, boxing us in. John! Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. What do we do? I didn't have an answer. We were trapped, with nowhere left to run. The trucks and headlights shut off simultaneously, plunging us into darkness. In the sudden silence, I could hear doors opening, footsteps approaching our car from all sides. Lock the doors, I instructed, knowing it was a futile gesture. Whatever was out there, I doubted locked doors would stop them. Shapes moved in the darkness, barely visible in the faint moonlight. They were human-like, but something about their movements was off. Too fluid, too precise. A tap on my window made me jump. I turned to see a face peering in at me. But it wasn't a face, not really. It was smooth, featureless, like a mannequin's head. Where the eyes should have been, there were only dark, empty sockets. I heard Sarah stifle a scream. Similar faces were pressed against every window, staring in at us with their eyeless gaze. One of the figures reached for the door handle. I tensed, prepared to fight, to do whatever it took to protect my family. But the door didn't open. Instead, a sound filled the car, a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. Sarah and Emily slumped in their seats, unconscious. I fought against the encroaching darkness, struggled to stay awake, but it was a losing battle. As my eyes closed, the last thing I saw was those blank faces, watching impassively as we succumbed to whatever force they were exerting. I woke with a start, sunlight streaming through the car windows. We were parked on the side of the highway, our spare tire properly attached. Sarah and Emily were stirring beside me, looking as confused as I felt. What happened?" Sarah asked, rubbing her eyes. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog from my mind. "I'm not sure. Must have been more tired than I thought. Pulled over to rest for a bit." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The events of the night came flooding back. The chase, the cliff, those faceless figures. It couldn't have been a dream. It had felt too real, too vivid. Yet here we were, safe and sound on the highway. No sign of any trucks, no mysterious dirt road, no cliff. As we pulled back onto the road, continuing our journey as if nothing had happened, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd experienced something beyond explanation. Something that had chosen, for whatever reason, to let us go. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a truck appearing on the horizon. But there was nothing there. Nothing but the long, empty stretch of highway behind us. We drove on in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. But I knew that none of us would ever look at a deserted highway the same way again, because now we knew what could be lurking out there in the darkness, waiting for unwary travelers. And as we passed a sign welcoming us to the next town, I made a silent vow. No more night driving. No more remote highways. From now on, we'd stick to the well-traveled roads, the busy interstates. Because sometimes, the things that go bump in the night are all too real. And not all of them are content to simply watch from the shadows.